Hi again, Samra. Welcome to this Facebook Live with us. And those who don't know Samra Zafar, she is an award-winning international, renowned speaker. She's a best-selling author too, and an educator for gender equality and human rights. So Samra, like many of our readers, they might not be knowing you. Should you just tell us something about yourself?
Yeah. Well, thank you first of all for having me here. I'm super, super thrilled. It's early morning in Canada. That's where I'm calling in from. I live in Toronto. And a little bit about myself. Well, first of all, I'll start off with my story, which is what the book behind me you see is all about.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
I was forced into a child marriage at the age of 16, and my dreams and my goals and my ambitions of going to school were all shattered and snatched away from me. And it was a very difficult time. It was an abusive marriage. Became a teenage mom, and that desire, that passion for education, though, never left me. So whatever I could do to pursue that goal, I would. Like, I studied at school through distance, studied at home through distance learning when I wasn't allowed to go to a regular full-time high school. And then I started to work as a babysitter at home to save money to go for university. It took me about 10 years to be able to start university as a married woman and a mom of two children. And that's when my world started to change. And I realized that I have options and rights, and the right to freedom and pursue my goals as a woman, as a human being, and as a Canadian. So I started to then make inroads to be able to leave the marriage. And when I did, and I pursued my education, it was really, my goal was simply to be able to get a job, put food on the table for my children, and just live a life of respect.
Yeah.
I never imagined, or even in my wildest dreams, thought of the kind of achievement and accomplishments that I would get academically. I was named a top student at the University of Toronto, and I won a lot of awards and scholarships. And at that time, there was always this hunger, this passion inside of me, this question that I have to do something with this. Like, this isn't just my story. This is the story, sadly, of millions and millions of women and girls around the world, especially in South Asia, especially in our parts of the world,
Yeah,
where
yeah,
there's so much shame and stigma and
yeah.
judgment associated with women and their marital status and their body and stuff. And I just needed to speak up and do something. So I started sharing my story in a tiny blog, and just I thought maybe when somebody will read it and
Of
somebody
course,
will
of
benefit
course.
from
Yeah,
it. And
yeah,
here
yeah,
we are
yeah,
today, 7 years later,
yeah,
with a book, and the book being adapted to a TV series and all the other stuff that's happening around it with speaking and everything. But it's like my soul food. It's my passion. And what keeps me going is conversations like these, and hearing from readers and people who've been impacted. It just, I I believe in this Mark Twain quote, that there are two most important days in your life: the day you were born and the day you find out why.
yeah.
And when I started sharing my story and saw the impact that it made, I found out my why of why I'm in this world, and I just keep going with that purpose.
So Sabra, I watched your TED talk, and honestly, after the end of it, I really wanted to get up and had it been like if you were here, I would have really hugged you. It's so
Oh,
inspiring. Honestly, you're so inspiring because you are seeing been through such a dark phase in your life, and yet you had the courage to stand up and fight. And no, like you said now, I mean, in the TED talk also, you mentioned that no, education was always on your mind. So like how did education and knowledge help you stand for yourself and fight and walk away from abuse? How did education help you?
I education is something that no one can ever take away from you.
Yeah,
So when I mentor women today, when I speak at different schools and colleges and universities around the world, I always highlight that no matter, even if you don't ever work or use it, but get your education, because that is something that is something you can stand on your feet on
yeah,
and lean on anytime in your life. So your educational independence, your financial independence is absolutely key. And we often see, and certainly I came from a very, very conservative, a very orthodox Muslim Pakistani family,
Yeah.
and my parents and my grandparents and everybody, like no girl from my entire family had ever gone abroad to study. Like my mother was was a teacher, but like they'd all stayed locally, done whatever little things they could.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I had these big dreams and I wanted to go to Harvard or Stanford and conquer the world and make a difference, etc. um, so I was always told, okay, dream, but don't dream too big. Stay
Yeah.
within your
Yeah.
limits. Don't forget
Yeah.
that you're a girl,
Yeah.
right? Like as long as they're dreams, it's okay. Just don't expect them to come true. Like Hindi mein
It sounds so
कहते
familiar because it
हैं,
feels as if it's the same thing in India too. It's the
exactly,
same.
it's the same
Yeah. Yeah.
culture. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
exactly the same. Like I mean, we hear all the time in Hindi. You can say like, "Oh, ख्वाब देखो बस पूरा होने की शर्त मत रखो," right?
Ha
So
ha ha ha.
that thing is like ingrained in all of us.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
used to hear this all around me, and then comments on my body. Like I'm a very tall girl, so I would
Mhm.
always like my aunts and uncles and grandparents would say to my parents, "Oh, take her to a doctor and get her some medicines, otherwise she'll grow so tall that we won't ever be able to find a guy for her." So this whole idea that the sole purpose of a girl's existence is to
Yeah.
find a husband, is to get married.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that's it. Like yeah, she can go to school, she can get educated, all of that, but don't remember her. Don't forget your
That's the
actual.
purpose. It's like the
That's
purpose
the
of.
purpose. Everything else is peripheral things, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So when I was like 16 and I had all these dreams, and suddenly this marriage proposal came along, and my parents were like, well, the boy lives in Canada, he's promising that he'll send you to school, so just this is the only way you can go to a proper like good university abroad, because we can't really send you on your own, you're a girl. And the whole thing was sold to me as a package deal for being able to go to a good university. And I was 16. Like I mean, and when you grow up hearing from everybody around you that this is your sole purpose and you should be grateful, and all my cousins were like, "Oh my God, you're the first girl among us to get married, how lucky," and as if it was some kind of an accomplishment. So I was pushed into it, but then all those promises were false. And then my mother-in-law, in fact, 2 months, a year, less than a year after my marriage, because I became pregnant right away. I gave birth to my daughter. And my mother-in-law said to me, "You should be grateful that you got to the real purpose of being a girl sooner rather than later. You should be thankful to us that you didn't have to go through all of that useless education stuff." So this is the kind of stuff that we are told all the time as women. But even in those dark days when I wasn't allowed to go out of the house or make any friends or have any kind of independence or freedom, I always had this voice in my head that I want to go to school. I do not want to give up on my education. And that is what kept me going. So I never had this big master plan of like, oh, this is how I'll do my school and then I'll leave my marriage and blah, blah, blah. I just want to go to school no matter what. Like, this is one thing I cannot give up on. So that's what, I always found a way. So when I wasn't allowed to go to a regular high school, I found this independent learning center where you could order your courses. And so I would do all my chores, take care of my parents-in-law, take care of my baby. And then I would go into my room at night and I would study. And that would be my happy time when I would be doing my math questions and all of that. And then eventually, fought my way as working as a babysitter, because he didn't pay for my university and I couldn't get government funding because they look at household income, and he was making good money. So then I had to get uh, make money on my own, but I wasn't allowed to go out and get a job. So I started working as a babysitter. But no matter what I did, like if that hadn't worked, I would have tried something else. Because for me, the goal was that no matter what, I'll have to find a way to go to get my education. I think subconsciously, I always knew that education is my ticket to freedom. Even though at that time I didn't plan on leaving my marriage, I just planned on getting an education. But I always knew, because I always thought that if I had my education right now, I could have left. Because the biggest hurdle in leaving is how will I put food on the table? How will I make a living? How will I sustain myself? How will I form a healthy family for me and my kids? So that is the biggest fear, the fear of financial turmoil and
Yeah.
financial ruin that holds a lot of women back,
Yeah.
because we are so financially dependent on our husbands,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
We are told that, oh, this is the provider, you take care of the
Yeah.
home, and we don't even ask questions on how the finances are being managed, and we're told not to. In fact, the women that do
Yeah.
are shamed.
Hmm.
So I always thought, like, if I only had money, if I only had an education, if only I could get a job, I could leave. So I always knew that. So I knew that that's something that is all, if I needed to leave later, it would be my ticket to freedom. So, I mean, I was in my second year of my bachelor's degree when I left. So I didn't even have a degree when I left, but I was on the way. And that in
Yes.
itself
Yeah.
gave me the courage,
Yeah.
because ultimately knowledge is power. And the more knowledge you have, and knowledge is not just comes from books and degrees, it comes from being out there talking to people, getting knowledge of your own rights, getting knowledge of your own self-worth as a woman. Like, I went from believing that there's something inherently wrong with me. I used to say to my counselor, like, maybe if I cook better food, or wash better clothes, or keep the baby quieter at night, or not talk too much, then things will be better. Like, what do I need to do? What is that secret to being a good wife, a good woman, that keeps eluding me? Because everybody tells me this is normal, like a good wife stays silent, a good wife tolerates, etc. That's why I named my book A Good Wife. So everybody tells me, and why doesn't it feel normal? What is wrong with me? And so I was like that. I used to think like that. And today I'm like, that no, there is absolutely nothing wrong with me or any woman at all. We are born as women, we are born complete. We are born with our birthright to be respected, accepted, and loved for who we are. It doesn't matter whether we choose to marry or not, or choose to have kids or not, or what career we pursue, or if we ever like, in our culture, like, if a woman is past the age of 25, it's her best before date has expired and all.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
none of
Yeah.
that
The ticking time bomb. Yeah.
exactly. And my own brother-in-law, for example, called me one day, my sister's husband, and said, what's the point of you winning all these awards and scholarships if you failed at the real purpose of being a woman? Shame on
Oh,
you.
wow.
So, like, these are the kinds of attitudes we live with
Yeah.
on a daily basis in our culture, right? So
Yeah.
I was like, and now I'm kind of like all, I talk about these things openly, because the whole point is, again, when it comes to education and knowledge in the work that I do now, is let's pull these conversations out from under the rug.
Yeah. Of
Let's put
course.
it out on the table. Let's talk about them, because change is never ever created through silence.
Cool. So, Samra, you have worked with no young school girls in Kenya and no different parts of the world. Like, is there any you find any difference between or no the women in Kenya or some other part of the world? Is there any difference in this kind of violence against women there and women in Southeast Asia?
So that's an excellent question. Thank you for asking me. So first of all, violence against women is universal. Like,
Yeah.
I used to, when I started first sharing my story, I used to think it only happens in our culture, India, Pakistan, that kind of,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
like, that's what I grew up with, right?
Yeah.
But when I started sharing my story and I started going around the world and doing this work, I have been constantly shocked and surprised by how violent it is. So whether it's downtown Toronto, whether it's a rural Kenya, whether it's a village in India or Pakistan, whether it's a city in India or Pakistan,
Yeah.
everywhere you go, whether it's indigenous communities here in India, in Canada, like, it's prevalent everywhere. However, it being universal, there are a lot of cultural nuances. So the barriers to leaving abuse are highly, highly, highly influenced by your culture, by your community, and by the level of shame and stigma. So I mentor a lot of abuse survivors, and one of the women that I mentor, she said one day to me, Samra, if a white woman leaves abuse, she will be supported, she will be championed, people will come and say, oh, good on you, you left him, like, you know thank God you stood up for yourself. She will be, hailed as a hero.
Yeah.
Whereas when a woman like us from Pakistan or India,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
leave, we
Mm.
are ridiculed, we are shamed, we are
Yeah.
judged, we are
Our
told
future
that
is doomed.
we are told we failed
Yeah.
at the real purpose of being a woman.
Yeah.
We are we are made to feel like we're damaged goods, used property,
Yeah.
no one
Yeah.
will want us,
Mm.
right? We are not at now respectable. We brought shame on the family honor, all of those things. So
Everything.
it
Yeah.
makes it so much harder to leave, because imagine, like, even if their situations are identical, the white woman and the Indian woman,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Let's say the situations are identical, like they both are educated, they both have the same kind of financial or career profile. um, just that level of shame, additional shame and stigma that South Asian women's face
Yeah.
is enough to hold us back. I have received countless emails after my book is released from women in India, from women in Pakistan, from women, South Asian women who are living in Canada or USA, UK, who are telling, like, they're doctors and lawyers and educated women who are writing to me that I cannot leave because my dad will never forgive me. I cannot leave because I don't want to cause shame. No girl from my family has ever gotten divorced. I cannot leave because my father will die of a heart attack from shame if I left. Like, those are the kinds of things that we deal with
Yeah.
that white women don't.
Yeah.
And then similarly, when you go to Africa, the situation there, the barriers there are different. The barriers there are poverty and lack of education, because in rural Africa, like, girls are walking, the girls that I spoke with in Kenya, they are walking 10-15 kilometers each way just to be able to go to school. In rural areas, no street lighting or anything, they're living in mud huts,
Yeah.
and they're getting sexually assaulted on the way. Some of them are dealing with teenage pregnancies. There are child marriage is a huge problem. In fact, 12 million girls every single year, 12 million girls are pushed into child marriages around the world. And the prevalence is Africa and South Asia, so India, Pakistan, and also those communities abroad. So right now I'm doing a study and a project on exposing child marriage in North America, because a lot of people think it doesn't happen, but it does happen. Not to the extent that it happens in other parts of the world, but it does. And
Yeah.
and I think some countries have the onus on them to take leadership on combating that. So in short, in a nutshell, my answer is that yes, violence against women is universal. It happens everywhere. Any woman could be affected. It is not impacted by socioeconomic status or anything. Abuse is is enabled by patriarchy and misogyny, and sadly we live in a world where patriarchy and misogyny is very deep rooted, even among very educated and so-called progressive communities. So it is, violence against women is universal. Even in Canada, there are thousands of women and children every night who are turned away from shelters because shelters are too full. So it happens everywhere. I've heard the same stories from, the executive towers of Bay Street and Wall Street to, rural communities in Canada, to emails and messages from India and Pakistan. But the barriers to leaving, the barriers to speaking up are much higher in honor-based communities like ours, where the shame and stigma is just that much elevated.
Yeah.
So that's the reason, like, I mean, the work that I do, I get a lot of backlash, but then the support that I get is so much more because I know
Yeah.
why I'm doing it, right?
Yeah.
So yes, it is universal, but definitely there are several cultural nuances, and that's why when we're doing this work we have to keep that in mind. Because unless, like, if, let's say, if I as a South Asian woman, initially when I went to a white counselor and I said I cannot leave because it will bring shame to the family, she couldn't understand what I meant.
Yes. Yes.
Because
The cultural difference. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so that's why having that cultural intersectionality
Yeah.
lens is
Yeah.
extremely important when we're talking
Yes.
about these issues.
Yeah. So I'm coming back to the talk that I saw yesterday. Like, you mentioned that, like, that despite being the class topper among 300 students, like, somewhere, like, you were not very happy about the achievement, like, in your words, like, you were petrified, you wanted to, crawl into a dark hole and never come out,
Yeah,
wanted to be invisible. So, which
yeah.
brings us to the next question. Like, now, what are the mental health implications of domestic abuse, especially gaslighting, which is like insidious and
Oh,
hidden?
so insidious. It is so insidious. So basically, you know, the reason I was petrified and I wanted to crawl into a dark hole was because I was afraid that people will see me.
Yeah,
Because what abuse does to you over the years, it it basically teaches you that you are not worthy of love, you are not worthy of respect, you are not worthy of being seen, you are not worthy of being acknowledged, your needs are not important, your identity is not important, your personality, your respect is not important. And that's because over the years, over and over, I heard that from my ex-husband. Whenever I asked him, why do you treat me this way, his answer was, because you deserve it.
yeah,
And whenever I talked to him about any of my needs, they were not met. I was simply a punching bag for his frustrations. So I had no self-respect, no identity of my own. So that's what abuse teaches you. So now suddenly I'm in school and I'm in the limelight and people are noticing me and wanting to talk to me. In my head, I'm like, oh, no, 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 I'm not worthy of this. You guys don't want to talk to me because you will figure it out sooner or later that I am not worthy of this. And I'm just the scum stuck at the bottom of his shoe. I'm not uh, you know, I'm not capable to have a conversation. So you will reject me anyway. So I should just hide now. So I threw myself into my studies and I had zero interest in making friends or having any kind of interaction with anybody, because in deep down I believed that I was not worthy of it, that I didn't deserve it. I only deserved abuse. I did not deserve um, any kind of um, you know um, respect or anything. So that's essentially what abuse does to you. And there are so many different I would say ways of how that happens. Is like gaslighting is basically when somebody, because when we talk about abuse, first of all, let me backtrack a bit. When we talk about abuse, and if you Google abuse or violence against women, you will
yeah,
see all these images of women with battered faces and
yeah,
broken
yeah,
bones and
yeah,
physical, right?
yeah,
People don't even talk about, especially in our communities, we don't even
yeah,
mention non-physical abuse.
yeah,
So
yeah.
abuse doesn't just start with a slap or a kick.
Hmm.
Abuse doesn't just is not just like, oh yeah, somebody came randomly and hit you. That's not how it works. In
Yeah,
fact, it's sometimes it never gets there, but it's not any less damaging. So I always describe abuse as this analogy of a frog. So if you put a frog in hot water, the frog will jump out and run away. That's kind of like somebody coming in randomly and giving you a slap and you'll report him or whatever, right? But if you put the frog in cold water and you turn the heat up little bit, like ever so slightly, and the frog's body temperature will keep adjusting to the heating water, and the frog will eventually cook to death without even realizing it.
oh my
And
God.
that is what abuse
Yeah,
is like.
yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah,
very, very insidious. It
yeah,
starts with little underhanded compliments, comments on your clothing, jokes at your expense, belittling your dreams and goals,
yeah,
and making you feel bad about yourself in different ways. It starts like that. And all of that is often wrapped in a lot of love and romance. Somebody
yes,
will shower you with love and affection. Because even if you, when you read my book, you'll see that in the beginning, my ex-husband was wonderful, right? He was just so loving and caring. But in the middle, like even in that love and romance, there were elements of control. Like, I want you to wear the hijab because you look so beautiful,
yeah,
and I don't want people to see
yeah,
my wife's hair, right? And I thought it's coming from a place of love, so I put it on. Then, yeah, I know you want to go to school, but isn't don't you want to spend all your time with me? Why do you want to be make friends with other people, right? And that's isolation right there.
yeah,
Similarly, like even later on in life, very recently I dated some guy, and he was like, I because I now recognize these early signs of emotional
Yes.
abuse, I was
Yes.
able to like recognize it right away and walk out. But some of the signs were like, oh baby, why are you wearing clothes like this? Like, I don't want other people to be able to look at you and you know, and think that oh, you're so beautiful and I'm not, you know. And now I'm like, oh no, but you are. Like, I'm trying to like placate him the whole time. Similarly, like, you know, oh, one person actually said to me, you are so successful that I don't feel like a man with you, so I need you
Wow.
to tone down your success so I could feel more secure about myself. And that I was like, that's not my job. My job is not to make you feel like a man, right? So again, but if let's say this had happened to me, somebody had said this to me 10 years ago, because my ex-husband did, like, you know, he always was like, oh, I don't want you to get this much education and all of that, because he didn't want, he saw the potential in me, right? He knew that I
Yeah.
would outshine him, and then he tried to pull me down, because that is what eventually abuse is about. It comes from a place of deep insecurity. And abusers, the only way they feel happy and powerful is by controlling the victim. So
Yeah. It's a
when
power play.
you it's absolutely power and control. So as the victim, when you go through that for years, you start believing it, like that frog in water, right? You know, your tolerance just keeps rising and rising and rising, because one time is this little comment, the next time is something else, the next time is something bigger. And by the time that slap or kick comes, you're already accustomed to it.
Yeah.
You are already in it so deep. You're financially dependent, you're emotionally dependent, you've lost your identity and self-respect. You only see yourself through his eyes, because you've been trained to do that. It's like you've become a trained animal, like a pet almost, you know, completely dependent, following the master, and in absolute, under absolute control. Even though you, and people think it only happens to women who are like living at home and you know, uneducated and all. No, because it's
No.
psychological.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
psychological. It can happen to anyone. I had a woman write to me. She was a professor, and you know, over the years she gave up her job, she gave up her career, she completely became an absolute shell of who she used to be. She lost her confidence and everything, because this man, because you know, we all want to be loved, right? All of us want to be loved. So when you get that love from somebody, you hang on to the good parts. And when you're a good person, you try to see the good in the other person. You try to give them the benefit of the doubt, that, oh, this was just a little comment, I shouldn't make a big deal out of it, or this was just a little, you know, um, a little joke, I know he didn't mean it, he said sorry, right? If even
Yeah.
this thing, gaslighting, is like that. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry you feel that way. Well, that's not a real apology,
Yeah.
right? Because it's not like, oh, I'm sorry, I know I made a mistake, or I know that was wrong, and here's what I'm doing to make it better. No, I'm sorry you feel this way. Or oh, it was just a joke, why are you being so sensitive?
Mm.
um you know, so what is that person doing? They're invalidating your feelings.
Yeah.
Like, if you are have a problem with something they said or did, and they tell you that you're just making a big deal out of it, and you're being so sensitive, and you shouldn't, you know, you should loosen up a little bit, like, what is wrong with you? Like,
Yeah.
that is gaslighting. And it happens over and over and over again. You start to second guess yourself and say, maybe I am being too sensitive, maybe there is something wrong with me, you know. And then you start not seeing what you have a problem with, because you know what the answer will be. That person will not understand. You don't want to create a fight, you don't want to create a scene, you want to keep your marriage intact or your relationship intact. You don't want to lose the good parts, because the good parts are why you have hope that, you know, things will happen. That's what abuse is, never black and white. There's a lot of gray, there's a lot of good stuff. Even in my horrible marriage, there were a lot of good times. And that's why I hung on, because I was like,
Yeah.
you know, maybe there's a switch that I can turn off and he'll be all good. So that is how abuse operates, and that is how women are trapped, because they hang on to that hope, and they lose their own psychological independence. So when I talk about mental health and domestic violence and the intersection of the two, it is coming from that place of losing your autonomy, from a psychological and mental point of view. And then basically, I mean, when you lose that, there's really nothing much else you have to hang on to, right? So when people say, oh, why didn't she just leave?
Yeah.
That's such a validating question,
Yes.
because
Yes.
it's not, oh, if
It's not
he
that
was
easy. Yeah.
flexible, why didn't you just leave?
Yeah.
People don't understand the complexities. And when I started writing the book, in fact, that was the number one question that I wanted to answer for people, that this is why women don't leave. There are so many different things that we got to think about. And I mean, even a person with all their psychological autonomy will have a difficult time. So imagine someone who's lost their confidence, who is completely broken down, and their spirit is broken down, and then they have to make these difficult decisions. They don't know what lies ahead. They don't know how they will be able to function without this guy, because this guy has made you believe that you're nothing without him, right? So when you believe that about yourself, how are you supposed to break free? And that's why it's so difficult. But my message to women is that no matter how difficult it is, you absolutely inside you have the power. You have the strength. You don't have to look outside. It's inside you. Yes, you will find people out around who will help you through it, but it starts with you. Sometimes
Yeah.
you don't need to have all the answers and all your ducks in a row. Just jump, just do it, just get out, and you'll figure it out. That's what I did. And yes, it's normal to be afraid. I was petrified. I was very afraid of leaving, because I don't have any family here in Canada. I didn't have an education. I had
Yeah.
two very young children at that time. But I had the hope that I don't want to sit there when I'm in my old age and think, why didn't I do something about it sooner? Because your life comes once, and your life is worth way more than one person who doesn't understand your worth. Because ultimately, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent, and don't give anyone that consent.
So, Samra, like you are also the global voice on the rising domestic violence during this COVID-19 pandemic. Like in India, like we saw 30% rise in domestic violence cases in the very first month of the lockdown. Like women who got a breathing time when their abuser was out of the house, they had to live with 24/7, right? So, which brings us to the next question: like, how can we as neighbors, friends, or even family members, reach out to women in abusive marriages? Are there any red flags or signs, especially like people, women who are in, who are more into emotional abuse rather than physical abuse, where you can't see, any physical signs of abuse?
Yeah.
So, are there any? How do we reach out there?
So first of all, I will just backtrack quickly and talk about the domestic abuse during the pandemic is absolutely rising all over the world. Because imagine now, women are not getting a reprieve from their abusers, because
Yeah,
abusers are probably not going to work. The women themselves are not going to work. Then
yeah,
you add on the layer of financial stress and just overall stress, right? Because we're living during a crisis time. So in every crisis, abuse always escalates, because the abuser is
yeah,
frustrated, and the victim is used
yes,
as a punching bag for the frustrations.
yeah,
Similarly, then you have financial independence, because now the abuser has even more excuse that, oh, we don't have money, or we've lost their job, or whatever. They have more of an excuse to control the purse strings. And there's and you don't have your usual outlets, like going to your friend, your family, or going to work, or just getting
yeah.
that bit of relief, right? So there's
Mm.
definitely a lot of reasons why domestic violence is on the rise during the pandemic. Now, how can we as neighbors, friends, and family members reach out, and especially with non-physical abuse? So the signs are all in. So, for example, if some of I didn't have a lot of friends during my marriage. In fact, close to none, but there were a couple of people. And I'll share a little story, because I feel like stories are the best way to put things into context. So there was the only place that I was allowed to go out was to the nearby play school in my neighborhood. And I was allowed to take my daughter there once or twice a week for her class. Like it was like a craft and things like that, where she would mingle with other children, and you have to be there as a parent. So I was
Yes.
always there with her, and there were other mothers and stuff. The woman who ran the center, her name is Nuza, she's in the book as well, that she would uh, she would see how jittery I would get whenever the class ran over a little bit. She like I would get all, oh my god, the class is running late. I would tell my daughter, please hurry up, do finish your craft, even if she's in the middle of something. and I would just get all like anxious that if I'm late then I'll get yelled at, and then I will, my husband will be mad, etc. So she saw those signs, and she basically, one day, as my daughter was doing her craft, she pulls me into her private office, holds my hand and says, "Is everything okay? Do you need to talk about anything?" And something just in me clicked, and I started to cry, and I said, and then I pretended it, like, I'm like, no, 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 everything is okay, I'm fine. But that stuck with me. And after about a couple of weeks, I did confide in her, and I told her what was happening. And then one day she gave me the next time I went, she gave me a list of phone numbers of helplines, and she gave it to me, and she gave me her phone, and she said, "Go into my office, I'll take care of your daughter. Just go and make some calls and talk to people and get knowledge and resources." But that, was such an incredible thing that she did. That was the first time anyone saw the signs of abuse before I even knew that I was being abused. I didn't even know the word abuse, but she saw it, the signs. So, and that time there was no physical signs. It was all those emotional, the anxiety, the feeling jittery, the, oh my God, like, so imagine if, I'll say now, in Corona times, you're having a Zoom call with a friend, right? and and you see the friend is always looking over her shoulder, that, is he here? Or she's like, oh, you know what, he's home. Maybe I can't really talk much right now, I have to go. Or if you're talking about something private, she suddenly changes the subject because he's now in the room.
Mm.
Or you feel, you like, trust your feelings. That is the main message that I'm trying to give here, is that if you feel something is off,
Yeah.
very high chances that something is off. If you feel that, if this woman, whoever it is not feeling comfortable in her own skin, she's acting differently in front of her husband than without, when he's not around. Like,
Mm.
one of the things that some people always used to say, like, when I went back to see my parents during my marriage, I was, my parents always used to say this to me, that when, I'm always happy and chirpy and everything, because I found myself again when I would go there, like. But then
Yeah.
as soon as he phoned, because he
Mm.
was in Toronto and I was with my parents in Abu Dhabi, and whenever he called, I would get all like, oh my God, he's calling, I have to like be this, I have to do, and like they would see the change in me.
Mm.
So if you're feeling something is off, like, just look for those signs. And one of the signs that Canada came out with, is like, if let's say I'm a victim and I'm having this Facebook chat or a Zoom chat with you, and I want to tell you that I need help, or there's abuse going on or something, then I can do this sign, and that means that
Yeah.
there's something going on and I need help. So something that some people now right now did, was, in fact, one friend of mine, she was genius. She put a status on her Facebook, that, if any of my friends or contacts are going through abuse, send me a message saying that you need beauty services or salon services, and that can be a code. So if you
Yeah.
send me a message that you need salon services, I will understand that you need somebody to talk to. That doesn't necessarily mean you'll call the police or something, but at least you have somebody to talk to or bounce ideas, and you can arrange something. So then I called my friend later, and I'm like, so did anyone reach out? She's like, yeah, a few women reached out, and I've scheduled some private Zoom chats or something like that, just to understand what's going on. So come up with your own signals, come up with your own code words. Another thing is on social, because a lot of people right now are on social media. So you can actually share articles about domestic violence on social media, like this talk, for example, or there are other articles that come out in the media or something along, even some infographics or signs, like look up and share. Because then what's going to happen is, let's say there is a woman in your network, and in your Facebook friends or Instagram followers or whatever, who is going through this, and she will see, oh, wow, my friend posted this. Okay, maybe I can talk to her about what I'm going through. This rings a bell. This seems familiar. Like, just a few days ago, I posted something about gaslighting, and I And the things as gaslighting, when someone intentionally twists your perception of reality for their own gain. And then I put some example phrases of what it sounds like is: you're so dramatic, you're overreacting, stop blowing it out of proportion, why aren't you loving, why is there no love in your voice, you sound so angry all the time. And that's not what I said, that's just what you heard because that's your perception. That's not what I said, I didn't mean it. I never said that. Like, those are examples of gaslighting.
Yeah.
So because I put specific examples on there and I put it up on my social media, and I suddenly got like so many different messages of like, okay, this sounds very familiar, this is what I hear all the time, right? So just by sharing things, just by watching out for those nonverbal cues, and trusting your feelings. So like I said, if you feel something is off, always reach out, because the victim will almost never make the initiative to reach out. It's very difficult because the victim believes that there is something wrong with her, right? So she will not be comfortable to reach out. And in physical abuse cases, victims, at least then victims are okay, this is abuse, so maybe I should
Yeah.
reach out. But even then it's difficult because the abuser has made them believe, oh, you're the one who makes me angry, that's why I do this, right? But still, there's a high chance or a better chance that she could reach out, because physical abuse is visible, the scars are visible, because
Yeah.
she'll be like, okay, so if I show somebody my black eye, they will believe me. But when it's non-physical, right, and the scars are invisible, the scars are on your soul, so people often don't believe you because abusers present a very, very perfect picture to the outside world. My own family, like I will, like, there's this incident in my book when my ex-husband at my sister's wedding hit me so hard in our bedroom. And then I pretended everything is okay because I didn't want to create a scene at my sister's wedding. And the next day, my chacha announced to everybody that Samra is the luckiest girl in this world because she has the best husband, because he's so loving. Because that's the picture he presented to everybody. Like, he was that perfect damad who's going around and doing all the chores in my sister's wedding and, like, taking care of guests and all of that. And then behind the scenes, this was going on. So when I did reveal to everybody that I was being abused, no one believed me because they thought I was just making it up. They thought there's something wrong with me, and that's why I don't talk to a lot of my family members today even. So but and that's even more worse with non-physical abuse, because the scars are not on your body, they're on your soul. So that's why, the first thing is look out for those signs, reach out, take the initiative to make the connection. Hey, are you okay? Do you need to talk? I'm here. And the absolute most important piece is be absolutely non-judgmental. So leaving abuse is not a one-time thing, it's a process.
Yeah.
And it takes time. Like, it takes multiple times. Took me 6 times to be able to leave, because it is, every time you leave you're like, oh, how will this happen, or maybe I should give it another chance, or your family sends you back, or there's other pressures you don't know about, the financial pieces, and he apologizes and cries that things will change and you forgive him and go back, right? So there's a lot of different reasons why you keep going back. But what happens then is, oftentimes, like, if my friend, for example, helped me to leave and then I went back, she will become very frustrated, and she
Yeah.
will be like, come on, I helped you so much and you went back again, what is wrong with you? Never do that. I know it's tempting, but never do that, because then the next time she tries to leave, she will not reach out to you. She will be too ashamed. So be very non-judgmental, that, hey, I'm here for you no matter what. Whatever you decide, I'm here for you. My support is not wavering. So those are some very key things. And just be human. Just be there, like you would be there for a very good friend, and in a non-judgmental, unconditionally supportive way. Because what that does, when you reach out and offer that help, it teaches the victim that, yes, someone sees me, I am worthy of being seen, I'm worthy of connection, because that goes completely opposite of what the abuser has taught her.
Yeah.
And that can make the a world of a difference in someone's life. That can actually save someone's life. That's what saved my life.
So like now you said, Samra, that like often like people, they're not aware that they are being abused. So can what can we do, and how can we educate our children or our youth to help them identify abuse? Like how what should we tell our children? Like I have a daughter, she's 10-year old, and like how do I tell her like she's being abused? Like,
Yeah.
is there a way?
So first of all, that's an amazing question. Mainly because that is exactly what I try to say in my TED talk and even otherwise, like in all my speeches, is that all the stuff that we are doing right now with abuse, like shelters or helplines or counseling and all of that, this is all reactive support. So abuse has happened. Now let's do damage control, right? How can we
Yeah,
be proactive and prevent it from happening?
yeah,
And that comes through education and awareness. And it comes from our youth, it comes from our children, our younger generation. So I have two daughters, they're now
yeah,
19 and 14. And I've had these conversations with them since a very young age, since I left my marriage. And what I do, a big way of doing it is like I take them with me to my events. They often come with me when I do these speeches. Or I'll share, we have a group chat on WhatsApp. So I often share articles about, like right now during the pandemic, when there were a lot of articles about domestic violence, I shared some, and then we would have a conversation around about that at the dinner table. We would, like, I don't think these conversations are taboo. I'd rather have them know and have the toolkit to protect themselves and look out and identify abuse. And because of these conversations, like one day my daughter came to me and said, Mom, I think my friend is being abused because our boyfriend, he buys her like chocolates and flowers and gifts and everything, but then he also calls her bitch, or he also like says something horrible to her, and he he's always like keeping tabs on where she is, and she gets all anxious and stuff if she spends too much time with her friends, and he's always like calling her every minute, etc. So now there was no physical abuse there,
yeah,
right? But my daughter understood and identified those signs of abusive behavior because I talked to her about it. Is because I expose my children to these things. And I am a strong believer that this education should be in our school systems.
yeah,
What do
yeah,
healthy relationships look like? What are early signs of abusive behavior?
yes,
If somebody is checking on you all the time, and they want to know your whereabouts every single minute, that's stalking.
yeah,
If somebody is
yeah,
saying I love you to you within 5 days of meeting you without even getting to know you, that's not romantic. That's a red flag.
yeah,
That's someone who's so insecure, they don't even know you, but they love you, and they're saying all that to trap you and to basically win your trust very early on so they can control you later on, right? If somebody
yeah,
is making jokes on your comments, or comments on your clothing or your ambitions, or trying to tell you that you need to tone yourself down or belittle yourself in some way, or making you feel bad about yourself, walk away. No matter how many wonderful gifts or romance or whatever he buys you, it's not worth it, because that is just the start. That is just the start. And a lot of women say, because, oh, it's only a little, it's okay, he's
yeah,
so good in other ways. But you know what, over time that pendulum will swing,
yeah,
right? Like I never ever thought in the beginning of my marriage that one day, 10 years later, my husband would almost kill me, but he did. I was all like, there were a couple of attempts on my life, and that's when I eventually left. But now that I look back, the signs were there from the very beginning. I just did not know. I was never given that education. I like, who talks about this in our cultures anyway,
yeah,
right? I was never given that education. In fact, I was told by everybody, my family and his family, that, oh, just, he's good, just tolerate, just find out what makes him angry and not do that and all of that. That's what a good wife does, right? So we need to teach our girls about early signs of abusive behavior, how to identify it, how to walk away, how to identify it in others. And the main thing is to teach them the purpose of their life is not getting married. If they do or not, that doesn't make them any less of a woman, any less of a human being, any less worthy, right? The purpose, we are born complete, we are born with our purpose, we are born, the fact that we're in this world, that is enough. We don't have to, do something or be something or whatever, like how we tie the honor of a woman to her marital status, and to her ability to bear children, or her clothing, or her uh, you know um, uh, ability to keep the family intact and all of that, that's not honorable.
Yeah.
Her honor, a woman's honor, is in her individuality. It's in her personality. It's in who she is as a person and what she is doing in this world to make a difference, or whatever, whoever she is as an individual. That's her honor, not about how she dresses or whether
Yeah.
she's married or not.
Yeah.
So those are just peripheral things. It's personal choices. So we have to like break that mold. So first of all, that, and then also we have to teach our boys about
Yeah.
emotions. Like, boys, the only emotions boys grow up with are rage and anger and frustration. So obviously that's their limited emotional vocabulary, right? So they feel angry, they exert the anger, they feel like a man. Like we say, boys
Yeah.
don't cry.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they don't even understand what it's like to cry and feel pain. So we're raising a bunch of narcissistic men. And
Yeah.
then they don't, because they don't feel emotions, they don't have empathy for the other person. So now if they hurt somebody, they hurt the victim, their wife or their spouse, especially if they've seen their father do the same to their
Yeah.
mother. So they have that example, the cycle
Yeah.
continues. So now they hurt their wife and they don't feel the pain. So the most classic trait of abusers is lack of empathy. And lack of empathy comes from lack of emotional connectedness. So emotional, if a boy is taught to believe that boys don't cry, emotions are bad, blah blah blah, he raises up to be a narcissistic person who causes pain and
Yeah.
abuse to the other person, and never feels any kind of remorse about it because he doesn't understand pain. He shut it out in himself, right?
Yeah.
So we have to teach boys and also we teach boys that, oh, your purpose is to be the head of the family, the patriarch. So now if they're married to a strong woman who has ambitions, they don't feel like a man. Like my ex-husband, for example, his mother was married off at 14. Both his sisters were married off young. They never had ambitions or never went to university or did anything. They were all housewives, and that's nothing. There's nothing wrong with being a housewife as long as it's your choice. But when you're forced into it, that's wrong. So he used to always tell me, what is wrong with you? Why can't you be a normal woman? Why do you have all these big goals and ambitions? And why do you want to go to school and have a career? Why can't you just be normal? So in his idea, I was not normal because that's not what he had seen. So when we raise our boys, like, in schools, we don't teach, like the heroes that boys grow up with. How many of them are women? Do we teach boys about strong women in history that have created a difference? How they see women is that, oh, the woman just belongs in the kitchen or she belongs in the bedroom, right? We sexualize women through media, through
Movies.
what we see in the movies. Like Bollywood item songs are famous
Yeah.
for that. We sexualize women in that way,
Yeah.
right? That's all a woman is capable of. We don't teach our boys about strong women in history. We don't teach women, boys about, even the social studies curriculum. It's all filled with male role models, that yeah, you as a man should do that. But we never teach boys about, oh, you as a man can support a woman to rise higher. That's also being a man,
Yeah.
right? So all that needs to change. So it starts with a young age, and until we can get this education in schools around the world, hopefully one day that will happen. But
Yeah.
we as parents have the responsibility to do that. So if you're a mother of a girl, teach her self-worth, her autonomy, her right to be herself and make her choices, and her independence, and give her the toolkit to be able to protect herself and identify early signs of abusive behavior. And if you're the mother of a boy, teach him about emotions, teach him about, redefine the idea of masculinity, that from what he's learned from other people or the media and stuff, and teach him what it means to be a real man, and the importance of emotions. And I'll just wrap up this point by, sometimes people ask me, oh, if he had turned out to be a good husband, it would have been a good story, right? It would have been fine. And I always say, even if he was the best husband in the world, even if he was the absolute best husband in the world, does that make it okay for me to lose my childhood, my adolescence, my right to choose when and if to marry, my right to choose when and if to have children,
Yeah.
my right to make mistakes and decide discover myself and be who I am and pursue my goals and dreams? No. Is that the sole purpose of a girl, is just to be married? So हाँ, अब उसकी शादी हो गई तो बस ये उसका मकसद पूरा हो गया. You know, no, that's not it. Right? Like, so even if he was the best husband, that doesn't negate the fact that my life got ruined and my life was completely snatched away from me. So let's stop tying this idea to a girl's existence of marriage, and that creates so many problems in a lot of contexts. So we need to start young. We absolutely need to be more proactive.
Uh, I'll just check whether we have any questions because. Thank you, Samra. Like, your because we work in a women-oriented organization where we come across stories of women in similar circumstances, right now, and uh, you know, uh, it feels like women are now victim of violence all over the world. The same way, there's no difference at all. No,
No,
it's yeah,
it's very universal. It's
yeah,
all over the world, for sure. But like I said, there are a lot of cultural shame, stigma, and barriers to leaving that make it so much more difficult for women to leave
yeah,
in honor-based communities. And that's the reason I wrote the book, is because I wanted the book to highlight the universal concepts of cycle of abuse and why women stay and all of that. But I also wanted to make sure that the cultural pieces come through.
yeah,
So I've been very, very vulnerable, and some, because I wrote the book after 7 years of sharing my story, and I when I used to share my story in TED Talks and articles, it was very high level, and sometimes women would write to me, oh, you can do it because you're Samra Zafar, you're superwoman and all of that, and I was like, no, don't compare my end to your beginning. I had the same fears, the same things that held me back, the same um you know shame and stigma factors that I faced, because I came from an extremely conservative family. So I had to make sure that I wanted to be absolutely vulnerable in the book, and talk about those mistakes, those pitfalls, those barriers and fears and shame and everything. So there, it is universal, yes, but it's highly cultural too. And it's high time we talk about it. We bring those conversations out from under the rug. We we stop hiding behind the veil of honor. There is no honor in silence, and silence only helps the oppressor. It never helps the oppressed.
yeah,
Silence never helps the victim. In fact, by staying silent, we're becoming complicit. We often say, oh, unke ghar ka mamla, it's their family
mm,
problem, we shouldn't talk about it.
yeah, yeah,
We think these conversations are taboo. We say, oh, women just keep talking about this stuff, it doesn't
mm,
happen. And I want to highlight the role of men, also, because it's, a lot of men sometimes say, oh, I'm not an abuser, why should I care about this? Well,
yeah,
it's not okay to not just be just not an abuser. What are you doing to highlight your friends who are abusers? What are
yeah,
you doing to challenge locker room talk? What are you
yeah,
doing to call out your colleagues who are making sexist jokes and comments at the women in your workplace? Right? So it starts with everybody. This isn't a men versus women issue.
yeah.
This is all of us versus the problem of gender-based violence and gender inequality. So we live in a culture of honor, and we need to just redefine that honor, and not attach it to a woman's subjugation, but rather attach that honor to a woman's independence.
We'll quickly take a couple of questions. We have a question from Ruchi. Have you come across other women in your life who got courage from your story? And does that
Oh,
provide?
that's what keeps me going. Oh my God, so many. Every day, every single day, I have dozens of messages from women all over the world. I can go on and on with examples. But even just I got a message from India, actually, just
Yeah,
a few days ago, and I'm gonna see if I can read it out. Yes. So she said, I just finished your book and I started feeling alive again. Few weeks back, when suicidal thoughts were trapping my mind, I found your book on an Instagram book page, and I instantly ordered it. And now I must say, this is the best thing I've done for myself. There is an instant emotional connection with your story, I'm going through the same hell. You fought bravely, and indeed, you are an inspiration and hope to me. After several visits to lawyers, counselors, neurologists, only your book helped me to stand up for myself and raise my voice. Your story has given me a confidence that I can do it too. So there's so many messages like that. This was from India. And in fact, my favorite one were three girls in a village in Jammu and Kashmir, India. They read my book in their little school library. And then they wrote to me. And their teacher scanned the letter and sent it to me. It was a handwritten letter. And then I sent them a video, and then they sent me videos of their own. And it was just beautiful. And one of the things that they said was that after reading your book, I know I'm on the right path and I will never let anything stand in the way of my dreams. That is what keeps me going. Like, that is my soul food. Just
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah,
yes,
yeah.
this is why I'm doing what I'm doing.
That's like, finding a purpose in your life. Okay, I am here because of this, and I'm going
I'm
to do
here.
this. Wow, yeah,
Exactly.
that's such a no, such a moral boost and a validation for yourself.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Samra.
Do you have
Thank you so
any other,
much.
do you have any other questions? I'm happy to take any
Uh,
other.
Jahnavi has asked, what do you think about women mental abuse is desperately increasing in our society?
Well, I
What
mean,
do you?
I talked about a little bit about mental
Yeah,
and
yeah,
emotional
yeah.
abuse, and I think when it comes to mental and emotional abuse, because the signs are non-physical, it's very difficult to recognize, and it's also very insidious because on one hand you want to give the person the benefit of the doubt that maybe he just meant it as a joke, or maybe he's just he needs to be educated on this. But on the other hand, you also want to be vigilant. Um, so the best way to recognize mental and emotional abuse is to write things. And I often give women this advice that every anytime something makes you feel bad, or there's a little joke, or there's a little comment that makes you feel bad about yourself, write it. And then over time you will see a pattern. You will see, oh wow, this isn't just a one time thing, this is happening constantly. And then also be very much in tune with your feelings. How are you feeling around this person? Like, how are you feeling when you go hang out with your friends? Are you afraid he will be upset with you? Are you afraid that he will have a problem if your meeting runs late? uh, like, one of the things that happened to me with this individual I was talking about was that I got a big promotion at work, and I got a big award. I was named as one of top 100 most powerful women in Canada. And he had a huge problem. And that was my sign. That was the one I needed. Like, he was like, he, instead of being happy for me, he had a problem because it made him feel insecure.
Period. Yeah.
So that is, like, trust your feelings. If you're feeling that this person is not happy for you, they're not invested in your growth, they want to control you, they want to limit you, they want to stalk you and keep you all to themselves, they don't want they the stalkerish behavior, comments, jokes like that. There's a ton of articles online on recognizing emotional and mental abuse. Read those, because when you read those, you see, oh my gosh, this is what's happening to me. So there's also something called the power wheel. So if you just Google power wheel violence against women, you'll find it. And it has a lot of really great examples of how abuse manifests itself in different forms. And physical is just like a tip of the iceberg. It's just
Yeah,
this much.
yeah.
All of that is not physical. So financial, sexual, definitely emotional, mental, psychological. So intimidation, all of those things are very, very common. So when the more you read, the more you educate yourself, the more you'll be able to recognize it. And I always say knowledge is power. And when you have more knowledge about abuse, it gives you the power to be able to walk away from it.
I have a question from Kanupriya. How do you see women with disabilities?
Women with disabilities, like, this world, I always say, when I read this tweet the other day, that privilege is basically people who are able-bodied, and we see people who are disabled navigate a world that is made for able-bodied people, and we say, oh, that person is so inspirational. That is
Mm.
what privilege is. Like, we've made this world for able-bodied people, right? And sadly, like, we have instances where we are doing more to help people with disabilities, or to create whether it's physical disabilities or non-physical disabilities. Workplaces are getting more and more aware, and they're trying to do their part. But we're still a long way away to create a world from creating a world which puts everybody on an equal level. And I know that women with disabilities have it so much harder. They have another layer to deal with when they're walking away from abuse,
Yeah.
because they all often, like, they're now physically dependent on their
Yeah.
abusers. In fact, there was a woman that reached out to me a couple of years ago, and because she was in a wheelchair and her husband was always hitting her, he was always abusing her, and she's like, I can't leave because who else will take care of me, because he takes care of me. She was 65, she was in a wheelchair, she was blind,
Oh my
and
God.
even though he hit her, she was forced to stay with him because her kids were not in her life, no one else was around. So she was like, I would end up in a disability home center or something where no one will, like, what will I do, how will I survive? I don't want to live that kind of a life. I don't want to be dependent on strangers, and you may not have the means to do it. Some people don't have the money. So um, now they are stuck with their abuser, because their abuser is their caregiver, and that happens a lot. So that's a whole other level of barriers that women face if they're facing disabilities. So I mean, I don't have an answer. The only thing I would say is that it's very important to raise awareness around that,
Yeah.
and make sure that the support systems that exist to help women escape violence are aware, and they have those mechanisms in place, so that if there is a woman who is in that situation and she's disabled, then we need to make sure that we have the we are equipped to help her. That's on us as
Yeah.
caregivers, as advocates. So when I speak about violence against women, I try to raise awareness on that. But the key is that our support systems, whether it's a women's shelter, like, are they equipped to have a woman in there? And then also, like, later on, when a woman goes into housing, or she's living on her own and she's disabled, how will she do that? Whether it's, or if it is subsidies to put these women in retirement homes, or other avenues where there are accommodations made, and there are equity initiatives in place, and encouraging companies and workplaces to hire women who have disabilities, whether it's physical or non-physical disabilities. Like, I struggle with anxiety, and
Yeah.
I'm very open about it. Like, in my workplace, I told them that I struggle with anxiety. Like, I've been through trauma in my life, and I don't run away from it.
Yeah.
But that means that there are times when sometimes I'll have to just take a step back for a couple of days to just bring myself to baseline. So I think the more women speak about it, the less stigmatized it will become. And then on the other hand, we also have to make sure that we advocate for laws, for support systems, and for workplaces to be more, I guess, more empowering, and making sure that we don't treat people with disabilities as some kind of a burden, but because they're not disabled, they're differently abled,
Yeah.
and they have other strengths that they can bring to the foray. And I think uh, we're slowly inching towards that, but long way to go. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yes, my heart absolutely goes out to women, especially in our cultures where there's already a stigma with being disabled, and now
Yeah.
like, people are like, oh, he's taking care of you,
Yeah.
that's the least you can do, as if but because somebody is taking care of you, it gives them the license to abuse you. No,
Yeah.
it doesn't.
So the last question will take from Supriya Saikia. She's asked, ma'am, how to manage study after marriage? I'm PG second semester student, Department of Sociology. Sometimes I lose my confidence. So
Oh, well, that is my forte. What I would say is that you can absolutely do it. And sometimes, we put so much pressure on ourselves, and we say, oh, I have so much study to do. We overwhelm ourselves, like there's a big mountain that I have to climb. Break it down into little steps. So when I was studying after my marriage, it took me 5 years to just complete my high school courses that normally kids would complete in 1 year, because I was studying at home, I was doing it online, I was doing it through distance learning while raising my child, while serving his parents, while taking care of my husband. So it was very difficult, but it was always like, even though, yes, if I were to look back, and if I were to sit there and think, oh gosh, I've got 6 high school courses and then I have a 5-year degree and all of that, I will be like, okay, I can't do it. I just feel very overwhelmed. I feel very demotivated. I feel very discouraged. But when you when you have that big goal, but you break it down into little
Yeah.
steps and just
Yeah.
focus on that. So what I used to do, and I still do, is like, okay, next test, next exam, next assignment, and just focus on that. Put all your energy, do it, and then the next, and then the next, and then the next. Like, just look at that. Don't look at the big mountain that you have to climb. Like,
Just
if
one thing at a time. Yeah.
imagine yourself climbing a mountain. If you look up and you're like, oh my god, there's no way, but
Yeah.
then you just, okay, one more step, one more step, one more step, one more step, you keep going. And then, like, a little while later, you're going to look back and you're going to be like, oh my god, I've come so far. And then that will give you the encouragement to keep going more and more and more. So, like, right now I'm 38 years old and I want to do my PhD. And when I think about it, a PhD takes about 5 years or so. And yesterday I was talking to my daughter and I was like, how, oh my God, how will I do it? I have a career, I have a speaking, I have a book, and I have, all of that. And my daughter was like, Mom, you did it when we were young babies and you had all that stuff to deal with. Of course you can do it. It's never too late. Right. So and I said to one thing to my daughter that but we just now finally have stability in the family and all of that. My daughter was like, who cares about stability? You're going after your dreams and you're teaching us to go ours after ours. Right. So
That is so inspiring. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
want to
Yeah.
role model for your
Yeah.
children.
Yeah.
So the fact that your kids or will see you going after your dreams and getting your education, that is teaching them to go after their dreams and valuing their education. So as parents, the best way to parent is by role modeling, is parenting by
Yes.
example.
Yeah.
So, like, even from a self-love point of view, we're taught as women that being a mom means being the sacrificial lamb, and you just sacrifice all your needs and put it all in the back burner. Is that the kind of mom that I want my daughters to be? No, no, of course not. I don't want them to completely put away their needs and their wants and their desires. So I go on vacations. I go solo travel all over the world. Right now I'm sitting at a cottage and I just needed a break from everything. And I put my needs first, because then I'm teaching them to put their needs first. And that makes me a much better mom.
Yeah.
So redefine that idea of, oh, if, I'm studying, so my child is not getting home cooked food every day. It's okay. Your child will survive. They will
Yeah.
thrive. Like, my
Yeah.
kids grew up on pizza for a very long time because I was going to school and I was,
Yeah.
a full-time student. So throw that out of your head and keep your eyes on the next goal and just next step, and keep going, keep going, keep going. And you will see in a while, you'll just look back and you'll be amazed at how far you've come. But no matter what you do not give up. Like, that's the only thing. You will fall, you will fail. It's inevitable. There will be setbacks, there will be detours. I was heartbroken several times when I applied to university and I couldn't go because there was no money, or there was, my kid was too young, or all of that. But I always tried one more time. So the only difference between success and failure is that you don't give up. You always keep trying. No matter how many times you fail, you get back up and you try one more time.
Thank you, Samra. It was such a wonderful session. And Nidhi Sharma, she says that it's such an inspiring and imperative discussion. And thank you so much. It was like,
Oh,
thanks
thank
for your
you.
answer. Now, Jahnavi, she's saying a great session, really inspiring. Thank you, Samra. It feels so nice talking to you. Thank you for joining
I had
us
a
today.
great time. I had a great time. Thank you so much for inviting me, and I look forward to more discussion. So feel free to bring me
Yes,
back anytime, and
definitely,
I look forward to
definitely.
keeping in touch. Thanks, everybody.
And all the best for your book.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.